Okay, so the first thing that we have to do for that race condition is we go into our entities class, so entities.cs, and here inside of our onModel creating, we go ahead and add a concurrency token for the remaining number of seats. So right here, we can simply go ahead and enter model builder dot entity of type flight. There we go. Dot property. Property goes to properties dot remaining number of seats, right? That's one we are caring about. Now we can simply configure that property to dot is concurrency token. So we will just discover what that is concurrency token method is doing in a second. So inside of our onModel creating method here, we just configured that the property remaining number of seats of our flight entity is a concurrency token. Okay, so now let's hit run and see if everything compiles fine. Okay, everything compiled, that's fine. So unfortunately, there is not a simple way to test the effect of adding the concurrency token. However, I will now explain you what's happening in detail when we are adding that concurrency token method right here. So as I was saying, one of the save changes comments always delivers to the database first. By setting the number of remaining seats field as a concurrency token, so if Alice saves the changes first, Alice wins the seat, and Bob's booking does not take effect. Moreover, if Bob saves changes first, Bob wins the seat and Alice booking doesn't take effect. But how does that single line of code do it? But what does that single line of code do? When the application fetches an entity, Entity Framework snapshots the database value of the fetched entity and keeps the snapshot internally in memory. Entity Framework also creates a separate entity instance for the application to attempt to modify. The application then modifies the entity. Once it calls the saveChanges method, the snapshot of the original database values is first compared to the current database values to see if another user has changed the concurrency token fields in the meanwhile. The point is that saving changes only take effect if another user has not updated the concurrency token fields in the database in the meanwhile. Let's consider our Alice and Bob analogy again. Imagine that Bob wants to book a flight. Entity Framework loads the flight Bob requests to book and keeps a snapshot of the original database values internally. Entity Framework also returns an instance of the flight entity to the application. Then the application reduces the number of seats while booking the flight for Bob. But before the application calls the saveChanges method for Bob's request, Alice has booked the only remaining seat on the flight and successfully saved the changes to the database. So when the application attempts to save Bob's booking, the number of seats from the database does not equal the number of seats from the original database values anymore. Consequently, the application throws db update concurrency exception while saving Bob's booking changes. Now let's move on and handle this exception.